What's up, guys? It's your boy Marcus Bullock. I'm super excited about this episode of Marcus Ask. I'm super pumped about it. I'm getting ready to let John come on in a second. Today we're going to be talking about jobs after incarceration. So some of you guys may have questions about how your loved one should be looking for employment after incarceration, or what you should be doing to help prepare them for all of that. And one of our guests today specifically works just around that, and so I'm excited to be able to join him in a second. So John should be joining in any minute. Please, this definitely wouldn't be a good conversation without your comments or your questions. So if you have comments, or if you have questions about this topic or any other topic that we talk about on Marcus X, please make sure you drop them in the comment section. I'm going to be reading them and monitoring them as we continue to have this conversation, but I wanted to be able to make sure that we're very, very, very thoughtful about addressing some of the actual issues that happen inside of the community. If you guys don't know, I'm Marcus Bullock. I'm the CEO and founder of Flick Shop, and my job is to be able to make sure that I work hard as I don't know what to keep family members connected to their incarcerated loved ones. And so we do that with the Flick Shop app. And one of the things that we like doing, in a part of ensuring that we keep families connected, is also connecting folks back to resources or people that we think that they need to be connected to, so that they can help their loved one overcome this situation of incarceration after success or reentry after incarceration. So super excited about this, guys. John just joined. I'm getting ready to let him in. So I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. Please be mindful and make sure. And man, we're going to get into this conversation. Let's see if we can get John to join in a second. Let's see here. It looks like John is joining. There he is.
I'm out of the Stone Age. Like I said, I created an Instagram account solely to be with you, my friend.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, man.
Happy to be here.
This is so dope. I'm super excited to be able to have you here. So look, John, one of the things that we like to do in our episodes of Marcus Ask is we like to get straight into the conversation, and we like to be able to make sure that we're giving our audience, our listeners, the viewers here on IG Live. Eventually, we're going to be able to cut this all up, and we're going to post it on our YouTube channel so that folks can be able to watch this for many, many days, months, and even years to come. And so I think it's important for them to know exactly who we're talking to when we open up these kinds of conversations. So let's take a quick minute before we even jump into the conversation. If you would take a moment to introduce yourself. All of you all that are here know, if you don't, I'm Marcus Bullock. I'm the CEO and founder of Flick Shop. We built the technology to help keep our loved ones connected during their incarceration periods. And then I'm joined today by my homeboy John, whom I met just a few years ago at the White House. And it was interesting that day at the White House. And I told him that day, I'm like, listen, anybody who I know who has been in these shoes and also wants to help contribute to helping people successfully re-enter the community, I want in on supporting them. And he said he wanted to do the same, which led us to this conversation here. John, take a minute, introduce yourself, please, to our listeners, our viewers.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, my friend. And yeah, it seems so long ago when you were up there with Kim Kardashian. I was just backing up. Right? But I thought you were going to be the most popular guy there that day, and I was hoping to be number 2, and then you were number 2, and I was like a distant third, way in the back. But anyway, I'm John Koufos, and I'm the executive director of a project called Safe Streets and Second Chances, which is housed at Right on Crime. Right on Crime is a tremendous organization responsible for leading the closure of 10 prisons in the state of Texas and bringing criminal justice reform really across the country, but to conservative states. Before that, I was in New Jersey. I was the executive director of the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, helping former Governor Jim McGreevey build that organization and build sites around the state. Way before that, I was a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer for about a decade. But the interesting part, other than my legal career, was the fact that I went to a state prison in New Jersey about 10 years ago. Actually, it was June of 2011. I was driving my car drunk. I was a functional alcoholic, Marcus, as you know, and I was driving my car drunk, hit somebody, hurt them, tried to lie my way out of it until I turned myself in. Thank the good Lord that person would recover. Nothing I did helped that, candidly. And I would deservedly go to prison for hurting that person, causing that drunk driving accident. And that would begin my ability to overcome alcoholism. And it gave me a sense, not just of purpose, but it gave me the viewpoint that candidly my clients were telling me about when I was practicing law. They would tell me about how terrible the prison system was, how much it didn't help. And I didn't think I could help as a criminal defense lawyer. And of course, as any of us who've had criminal defense lawyers know, that I also thought I knew everything about the system as a defense lawyer, right? But until that door closes behind you and they say yard out, you don't know anything about the system. And I was most moved, Marcus, by the goodness I saw in prison. You see everything in prison, of course, good, bad, otherwise. But the goodness of some of the people in there, cellmates I had, nobody asked me for money, which was good because I was going bankrupt, but I still had canteen. Nobody asked me for money, Marcus, but nearly everybody asked me for a job. And I never, ever forgot that. And that conversations with those men at Bayside State Prison in New Jersey catalyzed my desire to want to help. I observed one thing I observed many things that repulsed me in prison, but one thing I just could not stomach was the fact that people were getting paroled, going to the halfway house, and then being sent right back because of some, I don't want to curse on your live feed, your BS.
Do your thing, man. Do your thing.
For some bullshit fine or fee, they couldn't afford. It was a criminalization of poverty, Marcus. That's what I was witnessing every day. If you were poor, you couldn't afford to stay out on the streets. So you were sent back on a tech, and you served the rest of your sentence out. So I didn't know I was going to help with that. But I vowed when I got out, I would do something about it with my legal network. And we created the state's largest pro bono network. Actually, it was anywhere in the country at that point, to restore driver's licenses, mitigate fines and fees, resulting in over 400 driver's licenses restored, thousands of identity documents procured, wow, tens of thousands of dollars of fines waived, and thousands of warrants canceled. So that's how I got my start in reentry, was doing that. And had I never gone to prison, I would have never been able to see that with my own eyes and God willing, fashion a solution to it with my own two hands.
Nah, this is so interesting, man. I think that there's so many different stories. I'm sure that you could say the same, right, when you met people while you were there. But, when people talking about their journey into handcuffs, and then now, after they get out, the work that they decide to do, no matter what industry they decide to pursue, it's so interesting when you hear the stories, right? One of the things that is very important to me is really just changing the narrative for the people that are coming out of prison and be like, this is not a one-line person. This is not a monolithic way of living. People are just strictly one way, going in prison or out of prison. We're all humans, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about wanting to be able to make sure that we keep the families connected. Is always because it's centered in humanity. How you describe even the people who you met when you were there and how they didn't want to ask for bread, but they was asking for jobs. It just shows the level of humanity that we all have a desire to want to come home and win. Sometimes I think it's centered around social capital and resources. How do you see the reentry path for, specifically because you're in this career, right? People that have been in prison like me, or some of our, customers who use our technology, or the people who support our company, right? They understand that there are barriers for people that are coming home from prison. But because you're specifically in the work, one, you have your own reentry path. And when it was for you to go from an attorney that was practicing law to in handcuffs and then coming home and just trying to figure out how to redirect your career. What have you seen from others and some of the challenges that people have had after coming home from prison?
Oh my God. There's so many. Before I answer that, I want to point something out, touching on and this because you started this company, but I remember when they did mail call, And I always got mail because, well, somebody was suing me, for who knows what. My house was getting foreclosed upon.
People still was suing you while you were in prison?
Well, yeah, foreclosure actions on my house. The car was being repossessed. There was like various legal actions coming in. I had settled the lawsuit related to the car accident.
That's so instant. Like, it shows like life still was going on, even though you were in the cell. I'm sorry, keep going.
Sure. So I got mail every day. I may not have wanted the mail I got, but I got it. And, you just look at people's faces when their name is not called every day for mail, right? And your organization, your company creates that necessary linkage, which, by the way, is critical to the reentry pathway, right? And you know that, and I think your people viewing know that, but it's worth saying. Specifically with respect to the barriers. So, people think that when you're a criminal defense lawyer that gets jammed up, that, your life is just going to continue normally when you get out of prison. But actually, you're in many ways, I had very good friends, but I also was radioactive to large sections of the business community, right? Because they didn't care that, I was perhaps one of them before, right? The fact of the matter was I was a felon now, and I use that word because that's the way I was viewed. People first language certainly was not a thing when I got out. And
definitely not for me either.
Yeah. And so the barriers that I faced some myself. Again, my home was foreclosed upon. I had nowhere to go. When parole said, well, if you want to leave, you have to show us an address. I was fortunate enough and privileged to have a law school roommate let me move in with him, right? But if I didn't have housing, I was sitting till God knows what, until they probably lost my date. As I started to do the work, and I started, like any lawyer would, just looking at the legal problem, going back to that driver's license issue, you have people that don't even have identification to prove who they are. So that means a number of things, right? Let's just stick with that issue before I get into the rest of the discrete issues. If you don't have identification and parole tells you to get a job, well, you're not getting a job because you can't complete an I-9 form because you don't have identification. You're never going to get housing. You can't go to the doctor if you're in the throes of addiction or you need your medicine. You're not going to see a doctor because you have no identification. You're not going to do anything. So, what happens then is you have people who are administratively barred from their own recovery and their own reentry. Then you get into the housing providers. And I'll use myself as an example. So I went to get an apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey before I moved to D.C. because my law school buddy lived in Hoboken. I couldn't get anyone to rent an apartment to me. I had 4 co-signers for it, all, bank, general counsels, etc. Nobody would rent the felon, John Koufos, an apartment. That carried over when we moved to D.C. Our first apartment, and I can say it now because we bought a house here now, but our first apartment had to be in my wife's name because even D.C., as progressive as it claims to be, would not let me be on the lease on the first year. I had to make a big stink about it. That doesn't, and I'm going to go through a few and then I'm going to get to jobs, right? Because jobs
keep going. This is good stuff.
Is the number one problem. So take little things, right? Think of something you'll never, most people think of life insurance, right? So I have I get married. I have a 2-year-old girl. My little girl's going to be two years old next week. And, you want to get life insurance when you're having a baby in case you die so the baby will be okay. I couldn't even get life insurance, right? Nobody would insure me. And I have no medical conditions to prevent me from getting life insurance. It was because I had a criminal record. If I didn't have the access to the legal community that I had because of who I was, I would have never, ever, ever gotten life insurance. I was able to get the right people on the phone purely because of that. And that is, there's nothing more unfair, and there's nothing that crystallizes the privilege that exists more than that, right? Because if you don't know anybody, you're out of luck. Now, let's talk about jobs, right? So, the problem is that employers typically don't follow the science, right? So they follow the fact that they may have not known anyone who have gotten jammed up before. They may have certain prejudgments and prejudices on the subject. But what happens is people who have criminal records, if they're even allowed to be in the line, are at the back of the line in most situations. And this is something that I got out of prison in 13, so I'm not talking about 100 years ago. So what happens is you can't get a job. And then what happens is employers, they have businesses to run. So if they have one bad experience with an employee, right, who happen to have a criminal record, nobody else gets a job from that point forward. But the fascinating part is because they're hiring with their gut and not talking to people in the criminal justice movement like yourself or me or people at the Society for Human Resources Management, they're not talking to those experts. What is happening here is that you may take someone who is in early recovery, right? So if a person has a particular addiction, they're in early recovery. Well, the science is going to tell you that their relapse may be a part of their reentry, right? That relapse happens for people. So if they relapse and become and don't become a good employee, that's not reflective of everybody else. The people with the lowest recidivism rates are people convicted of murder. A couple of reasons. Number one, they're older than everybody else in all likelihood because they were stuck doing so much time on the charge. So because with age being the number one predictor of recidivism, you're safe. If you're an employer, your safest bet is probably hiring a person convicted of murder as opposed to someone who might have been a recovering alcoholic. And I use that being one. So thankfully, though, Marcus, we've seen private industry start to take the lead. And, you know, people don't like to admit this, but one of the most catalyzing corporations on the planet for this was Koch Industries, right? People gave the Koch brothers a really bad name for whatever political reasons they might have done so. But when Koch Industries said we should be in the second chance hiring game, the business community took notice and the business community followed. I'll give you an example. When we were in New Jersey, very, blue state, progressive state. I call it fake progressive in a lot of ways because they'll tell you it's progressive, right? They'll tell you they're with you. And then when it comes time to doing something, you might as well be in Alabama anyway. But when we were doing an employment opportunity summit in New Jersey with Governor Christie back in 2017, the general counsel at the time of Koch Industries, Mark Holden, came all the way up to keynote this for us, right? And first of all, he had probably much more important things to do with that, or I would have thought it would be more important, but he was Mark Holden selflessly devoted himself to this issue and still does. When he took the stage, other CEOs, other general counsels, other folks heard him speaking their language. And then they wanted to hire people. The highest spike we ever had in employment at the New Jersey Reentry Corporation was when Mark Holden was there, because the entire business community started to give our people a chance. And once they gave our people a chance, they realized that more often than not, you were going to do better than you would with just an average, or the same or better than with an employee off the street. Reason being, our population, as you know, Marcus, we're loyal, right? Because nobody wants to give us a chance at almost anything. So we're much more loyal to employers than I think the average person coming off the street. Our knowledge base is obviously of a different type. And the other piece is we appreciate opportunity in ways others don't because most of the doors are closed to us. So I think that all that's to say that thanks to people like Koch Industries, the folks that, Cut 50 and Dreamcore, CZI, or the Just Trust it is now, Arnold Ventures, etc. All of those groups started to catalyze change. And now we see folks, if you can believe this, Business Roundtable, which is comprised of the biggest CEOs on earth, J.P. Morgan, CVS, Aetna, etc. These corporations are now, through Business Roundtable, have formed a Second Chance Business Coalition with the Society for Human Resources Management. So by doing that, what they've done is they've brought our issue to the people who have endless amounts of influence. And I think that is one of the greatest victories, unsung victories of the criminal justice movement. And candidly, people like you, right, are the reason that a lot of these big corporations will have the confidence to go out on a limb for our population. They see Marcus Bullock, they see Flickshop, they're excited about it, they see the potential, and they're all looking, candidly, for the next Marcus Bullock. They ain't never looking for the next John, but they're all looking for the next you. And the beauty of this is that we have a business community today that's excited about the issue. Now it's on us to do two things. We have to keep them excited. Well, three things. We have to keep them excited. We have to make sure that we are working with reentry programs to provide them the best possible candidate. We want them raving about people with criminal records. We want them saying they're the best employees we ever had. And then, of course, we have to make sure the accountability is there and then they're actually hiring the people they say they're going to hire.
Let's go with that. Let's stick with that last one. What are some of the one I wanted to go back to? I want to go back to some of those companies that you named that are forming this, this roundtable that are being intentional about this second chance hiring practice that is kind of sort of, as I'm starting to hear, is sweeping across the company, across the country. Can you name what are some of those companies that are being thoughtful about this second chance hiring commitment?
Sure. Well, Koch Industries has always been. So we should start there. Among large corporations, always been there. But when you're looking at Business Roundtable and the Second Chance Business Coalition, J.P. Morgan has hired people. Has I think they're up to a few thousand nationwide, led by Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan. You have Eaton, which is a huge, manufacturing company, which is based in Ohio, if I recall. In fact, their CEO co-chairs that. You're seeing CVS start to get into this space as well. And you're seeing the energy industry get into this in a bigger way. You saw it a lot during the Trump administration because, candidly, the energy sector was in a different financial position. It was booming then. You couldn't find anybody to work on oil rigs or any of those places. So the energy sector and those monstrous corporations in the energy sector started to hire more people. I can tell you the really exciting thing is, so what about if you're in Newark, New Jersey, right? If you're in Newark, New Jersey, and your biggest employer are places, are big business, but they're your biggest sort of community employer, the hospital systems, and you can't work in a hospital because you have a CDS charge, right? One of the exciting things that we're seeing places like RWJ Barnabas, the second largest hospital system in New Jersey, do, is they recognize that you can't hire someone with a particular record, say, as a, to handle the narcotics in the hospital, right? They can't be around certain patients depending on what the regulations are. But what they're willing to do is they're analyzing their supply chains, right? So what they're doing is they're being intentional about hiring perhaps the food vendor, for example, in some of the hospitals will be run by someone who is formerly incarcerated, right? Or someone from the community. The same with the people who provide any number of services to a hospital, whether it's the cleaning services, whether it's the uniforms, whether it's the some of the support and training staff, some of it's the medical billing and coding, right? So you're seeing industries that can't get into the fight doing it in other ways. I think that's really exciting. There was a great woman, if you ever have a chance to meet her, from New Jersey, named Micheline Davis. She was the vice president of corporate affairs there, and she and Barry Ostrowski, the CEO, are two of the reasons why that launched.
I think this is so interesting as I think about some of the opportunities being unlocked. I mean, if you leave it up to like the what the media will portray, or forget that, what you will leave it up to like the people who are on a rec yard talking about what the opportunities are before they come home, you would believe that there aren't any that are available for people that are coming home from prison. But what I'm hearing from you are that, one, there's a growing trend of folks who are being thoughtful about giving second chance hiring, bringing second chance hiring practices into their companies, but that there are also entire industries that are continuing to snowball this effort. One of the questions I kind of sort of have for you here is specifically around the people that are in the sales and how, knowing that while you would give an example of a hospital in Newark, but, there's people that are in Palo Alto, in the tech, who want to come home to the tech industries, or the people that are in Florida who are, thinking about how to integrate themselves back into the agriculture industries, or whatever the case may be, no matter where you are demographically, right? Geographically. One of the questions I have to ask for the community of the listeners are, should you prepare yourself for getting back to work when you're getting ready to come home? If you're sitting in a cell now, what do you do to prepare yourself to get back to work? And then the second part of that question is, how should the loved ones, the family members, help to support that preparation to get your loved one back into one of these amazing career opportunities after incarceration?
Sure. Great question. So I think the number one thing, and again, this is the this is the pencil pusher lawyer in me, right? But the number one, I think that you got to make sure that your administrative barriers are handled. And what are your administrative barriers? Where we began, right? Do you have open warrants anywhere? And if you do, make sure that somebody's contacting the court for you to do that. Don't rely on the prison social worker or any of that. If you have people on the streets, if you have nobody, then you have to, right? Contact your legal aid organizations or your reentry programs, or write to me at Right on Crime, and I'll find you a local lawyer to help you out.
Y'all hear that? If you're in Texas, hit John up.
Sure. Or actually, anywhere, to be honest. I'm lucky to have a good network. But I think that, and you see big legal organizations taking this on. Texas Fair Defense Project being one of the best in Texas. Root and Rebound out in the West Coast, another great one. And of course, the group that we worked with in New Jersey. So I think that you have to do that first. And why do you have to do that? Because an ID and old fines, fees, if child support's got warrants for you, etc., those are, resolving that is your ticket to the dance. Right? You don't even get in without that. So, and if you have time before you're going to be released, you have time to try to fix that problem. So that's the first thing that I would say to do, because so much of the reentry process, as terrible as this is in this country, is getting the person back to zero, right? You can't even think of making grounds because no one's gotten you anywhere near zero, and God knows how long, right? For families, I think some of the key things that a family can do is, number one, if there are reentry programs and training programs that exist on the outside, you're going to want to make sure that you figure a way to get the most seamless transition in. So, for example, most people don't know, no one tells you in prison, that every county has an American Job Center that sometimes parole makes you go there, sometimes they don't, but there's a tremendous amount of training resources there. So, depending on what training offering, and they're free. Let me start that. They're free training offering. In fact, the government pays for it, so anyone who's unemployed or underemployed can partake in it.
At the American Job Center.
Yes, they used to be called one-stop career centers, and I had the privilege of helping run one in Jersey City, the reentry side of one, a few years back. So this is all free training. So the idea then is that you want the loved ones to be able to help someone get into that, right? The other thing I think your loved ones, should be thinking about is understanding the adjustment period, right? No matter how many letters we write and say, hey, on day one, I'm ready to start working. That's probably not the reality. On day one, you have to see how your stomach handles human food again because you've eaten gruel for X amount of time, right? On day one, you have to not jump when a loud noise happens near you, right? You have to sleep in a bed if you have that option. That is, if you have loved ones to go home to, and the loved ones have to, I hope, will create a little bit of space for that. Doesn't have to be forever. Doesn't have to be 2 months. It doesn't have to be a month. Just give a week or two for someone to get a phone, to understand how to use a phone, to say hello to people they haven't seen in a while. Right? Let them get their feet under them a little bit, and I think you'll see much greater success. So, loved ones can help in that planning process. If a person has an addiction history and it's going to be a condition of parole, you need to get that handled right at the front end, because I'm living proof that that will kill you and perhaps somebody else faster than almost anything else. It also will be render you unable to participate in any sort of real reentry program. The final piece of it, I think, has to do with making sure that a person knows that their first job out is not necessarily going to be their last job out. And that's really important, because you can go to the American Job Center, say you want to be a coder, and they have coding there, right? While you're doing your coding, you may need a job, and you may work in some industry you're not that thrilled about, right? And I think you just have to remember that if you can show someone that there are ladders of opportunity to get to where you want to get, people are self-motivated. They will handle this themselves. I think a lot of the rub I saw or I've seen working in direct services in reentry is the fact that you get put in a warehouse pushing a pallet jack, and no one ever tells you can do anything else, and candidly, no one ever creates an opportunity for you to do anything else. If you have to work in a kitchen, go take the cooking class at the American Job Center and become the chef. And then you can become the owner, like a Chef Jeff, or if you have that kind of talent. And I think that's there's a psychological game to this as well as an operational game. And I think if the two run concurrently, you're going to see much better results.
This is incredible. This is amazing jewels that you're dropping right here. I know we're running out of time, but I got a couple of questions I want to be able to hit. Specifically, one of the folks in our comment wanted to know, how would you describe the impact of the First or the Second Step Acts?
So the First Step Act, the First Step Act, and people don't like to give it any credit because it was President Trump, right? And if a person doesn't like President Trump, they start to go apoplectic if you say he did anything well. But he happened to do criminal justice really well. And this is what I will say about the Trump legacy on the First Step Act. The most important part of the First Step Act is political. And here's why. It gave red state governors that had little interest or were politically worried about doing criminal justice reform the cover to do so. You saw red state governors, hard on crime governors, look around and say, well, if Trump did it and people like Trump and people in my state like Trump, I can do this too. He gave them a pathway through the First Step Act to do what's right, and to restore some level of dignity. At the same time, the First Step Act obviously, did some great things on crack cocaine disparities with the retroactivity. The compassionate release aspect of it was sorely needed. You have some prisons that look like a nursing home, right? You have people that are no threat to anybody, and they're being held. So I think that was the real import of the First Step. It was tremendous law on its face between, pre-release custody and all the technical parts that would put you to sleep if you read it, right? It's a very dense bill. But anyone in the criminal justice movement should know that is the law that gave cover to hard-on crime folks that did not want to touch this issue before, and then they started.
Let's go into the we got like 2 more minutes. Let's go into how would you describe the second step?
So I think the next step that we need to do, and Cory Booker is one of the people spearheading this, Senator Booker, is a Second Look Act, right? Second Look, just a quick version of Second Look is that it gives the person a chance to go back before the judge, say on a very long, say you have a 25-year sentence, you get to go back before the judge within, say, 10 years. So the judge can see if you've tried to do any better and if you're appropriate for resentencing. I think that's a great way to right-size some of these exorbitant sentencings and mitigate some of the disastrous racial disparities in our system.
Nah, this is good stuff. I mean, I'm sure folks wanted to hear the answers that, like, they're reading about First Step and Second Look, but they wanted to be able to hear someone else be able to break down something in the language that they speak. I have one more quick question, and then I'm going to give you some last moment words. If you were to say what some of the hot industries are that you're hearing about for people that are looking for jobs that are around the country, right? And I know that each one of our local geographical areas has their own hot spaces, but what trends are you seeing?
The great question. I'm so glad you asked that. Anyone who has a port near them or anything controlled by a port authority or a TWIC card, Transportation Worker Identification Credential. One of the things I've been very lucky to do is I've been working with the Biden administration on streamlining the TWIC process for people with criminal records. A TWIC card is what you need to work on a port, right? And working on a port could mean any number of employers there. It could be the energy industry, etc. But the idea behind the TWIC card is that it's for so long people just assume if I have a record I can't get a TWIC card. That's not true. It's just the process is a real pain in the ass right now, right, for people with criminal records. But we're working to develop methods to streamline that. We hope to pilot it in a few places. But I would encourage anyone with a criminal record who's been out for over a year, because you do usually need that buffer period, to look for the better paying jobs at the ports. Are usually union jobs. They usually pay more than the community jobs as well. And they usually have career growth. And there are any number of it. They can be everything from food service to heavy manufacturing to the oil and pipe fitting and gas industries.
Thank you. These are incredible resources. John, I'm gonna give you the last word. One of the questions that, that I have personally are, right, what do I say to my best friend or my cousin or one of my nephews who are coming out of a cell, and I'm not really as connected. They're not like the person that I'm assuming, the responsibility for, right? But I want to see them win when they come home. What are some of the ways that I can support them, right? I'm not the one that's like, they're not living with me, right? I'm not like, giving them a bunch of cash, I'm not, employing them straight out the door, right? Like, but I do want to help support them when they come home. I also may have some resources at my job, right? But I don't know, should I connect them to those resources at my job? Should I like, I want to help you with your resume. What do I do? Like, how do I support them?
Sure. Well, listen, all of us know that the number one way people get jobs is by knowing somebody, right? And that's not a joke. That's the reality of it, right? If you know somebody, usually you're called before the job opening even happens. So what I like to do and what I encourage everyone to do are to think about your networks, right? Now, but be very judicious about your networks and be very protective of your networks in the following way. If the person you're talking to is trying to do the right thing, open your network to them. You may not want to open up a network within your own office because of, some people don't like to refer people within their own office, but people who hire, right? I know people who hire, and everybody probably knows somebody who hires. Have that conversation with them, right? And go to bat for people where you can, right? Where it's comfortable. And sometimes going to bat is hard advocacy, right? Saying, look, this is the right guy. He's a solid guy. Known him for a lot of years. If you did. Sometimes it's, hey, listen, I know that he's on the level. I know he's doing the right thing. I know his mom is helping him where they can. I know his grandmother's helping him. All he needs is his foot in the door. Can you help him out? And you'd be amazed that when John or Marcus or somebody else comes to somebody and says that, how many doors can open. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's how most of the people get their jobs anyway. How many lawyers do you think get hired blindly? Right? Somebody knows them and says, I know this guy from the prosecutor's office, give him a call and let's bring him on. So we should really be looking to use our networks where appropriate. And if we do that, we're also going to create momentum that normalizes the hiring of people with criminal records.
Man, this is dope. John, thank you again for joining us, man, and having this conversation with me. You guys that joined us, thank you for joining us for another episode of Marcus Asks, right? Where we try to be able to have real conversations and specifically with people who are directly impacted by the justice system, right? Like we are the ones who we know what we want to know. We know what questions we have. We know the conversations that we want to see had, right? So if you want to join us or future, if you want to have questions for John, go jump in his DMs. Make sure you follow him on Instagram and ask him those questions that you may have not wanted to ask in the public, right? If you want to be able to see or listen to a topic that you think is going to impact your loved one, jump into Flick Shop's DMs. Our team is more than happy to figure out ways to be able to continue to support our community. Where we here at the Flick Shop offices, we want to make sure that we're reducing recidivism. When people come out of prison, we want to make sure that we help keep them out. And we're going to do everything that's humanly possible to be able to make that happen. It wouldn't happen, though, without our community of people like you guys and folks like you, John. Thank you so much again for joining us this evening, man. You took so much time out of your schedule tonight. You showed me up, you know what I mean? Everyone knows I wear a t-shirt every day. You showed me up with an amazingly tied necktie, with your suit, man. But I'm going to forgive you for it this time. I hope you'll come back and join us for another conversation in the future.
Anytime, my friend. Thanks for everything you do and have a great night.
Absolutely, man. You do the same. Talk soon. See you guys later. Thank you guys for joining us.